when you're asking students to engage in this reflection on their worldview and what part of that they would like to share with others in this attempt to change either the classroom dynamic or maybe a myth that they've heard or a stereotype or maybe a social injustice that they'd like to try to institute some change within. When you're asking students to do that work, I think probably the way that that informs my teaching philosophy the most is that sometimes you have to really slow it down. That the 10-week quarter is something that we have to push deadlines quite often. And what I found in these classes that it's really about providing space, allowing the students to work in small groups, pay attention to the way that the conversation's going, look at who's getting to speak the most. Is there somebody who maybe has spoken and hasn't been responded to? And so there's kind of this dual purpose that's always going on, which is the purpose that you're moving a writing project along, but that there's also this other purpose that has to do with getting them to understand what it takes to develop the communication between each other that's going to make the writing project more audience specific and more targeted towards the purpose, the larger purpose of the assignment. So whenever, as a teacher, I see that there may be a need in the class to slow things down because maybe some students are moving into this idea of putting their stories, their writing, placing it within a larger conversation that's either happening within the community or within the world or within the class or amongst themselves and other students. Some students may take to that process more easily depending on what their chosen topic is or how much experience they have with it or how comfortable they are speaking from the perspective that maybe we're calling upon them to write from. I have to be willing to very often structure the calendar in a way where there is a lot of buffer space, some space where we know we're going to be doing something, but we're not quite sure maybe at the beginning of the quarter what it is. And so I'll schedule the quarter where we'll have maybe the first 3 or 4 weeks pretty well mapped out, and then I'll intentionally just put a day into the calendar that's called a workshop day. And there's usually several of those within my course calendar. And that's just a time for me to really assess where the class is. As a teacher, I enter into a very similar process with them. One of the things that I have come to value, and this was taught to me in my early graduate studies by a mentor of mine when I was first learning how to teach writing, is to do the writing assignments with your students. And so as you're doing the entire writing process with them, and sometimes I can do it more authentically, such as like the writing social change course that I'm teaching right now. I'm actually doing every part of the project with the students. I too have chosen an issue that I'm working on, and I'm doing some community organizing around it. And I'm able to bring in some examples of my own work for the students. You know, it's funny because I don't know how it happens, but it happens. To show my own vulnerability in that process and my own even naivete sometimes. And in the naivete, I mean that I sometimes will bring in counter stories or mention how a particular conversation that I had or article that I read or person that I met or workshop that I attended maybe introduced me to seeing something differently than the way that I once perceived it to be. And I think by creating that space where I'm expressing the divergent viewpoints that actually even exist within myself, even those moments of confusion and meaning making, that I walk into a classroom and I don't have an answer to all of the questions that we're going to be asking. And even when you look at community based work, I don't know where the next 10 weeks are going to go. And so this ability to hold what we call them roundtable discussions, and they're problem solving dialogues where a person brings up an issue that they have or a concern or something that they witnessed or heard or a goal that they'd like to achieve and they're not getting to that, and just telling students that we're all here to support each other in achieving whatever our goals might be, and that we're all going to have very different goals.